Historical Society. They might have been the County Historical Society, but they're the ones that put on programs anyway. But they had programs by Doug Tudhope, Winway, guys like that, who I thought of as the old guys, okay? And that's what we got here, the old guys. We're going to fill in this history of cider, because cider's been around for 30 years. Not that long to be in history, yeah, good. Hopefully longer. But, I mean, we've all been here for the history. But we don't all know that, you know.
I'm trouble hearing back here.
Okay, well,
Have you done a mic?
I know.
Technology is not cooperating.
That's it. So, but there's seats up front. Move your seat up front. I'll try to yell louder. But other than that, yeah. So, I mean, megaphone. I don't know. But so yeah. So I hope you'll all pipe in with any remembrance you have or correct any things here. This summary. And this is the only thing to read. I don't know if. Just to get us all started. You don't have to read it. I'll read it for you. But it comes out of a report that was written in 1993 about what the islands needed for services and things, okay? And what it says is that in '88, Jane Potvin distributed a survey at town meeting that included questions about needs of people in the islands. Islanders expressed their dismay that family and friends had to move off the islands when they got older and needed a little help. They said it was a shame that people had to travel to Chittenden and Franklin County. So after Potvin's survey, a small group of islanders started to talk about building a structure where frail elderly people could live and get personal assistance. With the help of staff from Franklin Grand Isle Regional Planning and the Development Commission, a request for community development grants funds was submitted for development of a residential care facility. So they're talking about some kind of housing, with space for an adult day care program, child care center, and community arts. So that didn't happen. But after the grant had been submitted and following further discussions, members of the informal group raised questions about the real need for such a building. They were not sure if there were enough frail people in the county 30 years ago, no, you know, to make such a project feasible. Some suggested that a better approach might be the development of a way to enable frail people to continue to live in their own homes. Sound familiar? Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about. And that's what this survey is, study is. Okay? And, you know, the study was this. Oh, what happened? How do I get off the... That is in real time here.
So you're on the computer?
No, I'm on this. How do I advance to the next screen here?
Maybe you're on the computer.
You're
No.
on the computer.
I'm not on the computer. Put right into here.
But where's that paper?
It was right here.
But it's showing.
Old people have problems
Okay, I'll
with
help you out.
technology.
Okay, you'll work on this.
Yeah, I'm here because I'm the only one left in town that was on the initial board.
It's not on the computer, Terry.
All right, but if you're going to fight, you've got to keep it down, you two. So, from the grant was
Who are you?
Who am I? I figured everybody knows me. I know most people in there. Sherry Corbin. I was 28 years old, newly on the planning commission, and the towns of Grand Isle and South Hero got this planning grant. The planning grant was to study elderly and child care needs in the islands. They wouldn't fund just elderly without the child care component. I'm not sure, but the parent-child center may have come out of that grant. I'm not positive on that, but Barb...
I think I asked Barb Carter about that, and I don't think it did.
Well, because Barb Carter was involved in this grant, in the grant study. So I'm brand new on the planning commission, and John Roy comes in, who is select board in South Hero, and says, we need a planning commission member. And of course, all the rest of them went. I mean, so I did it, and I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no idea. They kept talking about AAAs, the AAAs, which are the area agents. Tell me what it is.
Area agencies on aging.
Area agency on aging. I thought it was car stuff. So for the first 6 months, I didn't know what they were even talking about. And then all of a sudden, it kind of took off. And John and Sharon Roy hooked in Sharon's cousin, Tim McKenzie, who was working with the Burlington Community Land Trust or Housing Trust, and they started a nonprofit. They put the nonprofit together, and from that, a small board was created. The main thing that struck me that came out of the grant was that Vermonters stay in their home as they age way too long. Islanders stay even longer. Because, one, there is nowhere to go. Plain and simple, there was nowhere to go. So, are you all set now?
I think so.
Okay.
Keep talking, will you? So, just up to this survey, this report that I showed you was written in 1992.
Yep.
1992. The Citizen Advisory Committee, there's the names on there, Jane,
Yep.
John Roy, Sherry Corbin, Deb Lacey, Rich Crocker, Art Goodrich, Scott Monica, Ann McKay, and Holly Swicker.
Right.
Okay, so then,
Now you're right where I was.
okay, thank you, I wasn't listening
Okay.
to you. Okay, so here's the Elder Care Advisory Board votes to form a private non-profit organization. Can you hear me now?
Luckily they can
We have to
read.
read. The Elder Care Advisory Board votes to form a private non-profit organization to coordinate services and information for seniors. And they adopted the name of Cider.
So is anybody at that meeting that's in the room now? The church was packed. It was at the Congregational Church. It was a big crowd, bigger than what's here today. And we had to have a name. So those of you that know John Roy understand the way he works. And so Cider came about not because we had a great name and we created an acronym. We created an acronym and then filled it in. And it took us most of the night to fill it in. So by the time we were done, we were like, okay, that works. All right, you can go now.
Okay, so, and John Roy, I talked to him yesterday. I was hoping he'd be here, but we'll see. But yeah, I hope he comes because he is clearly involved in all of this, John Roy. Okay. So, articles of incorporation are filed for 501c3 nonprofit, and the incorporators are listed there. Richard Crocker, Sherry Corbin, Paula Bowen, Mary Pringle, Dan Hazen, Leo Spear, Omer Corbin, Gail Horn, Tammy Gardner, and Scott Vonnegut. So, then in '93, the first annual meeting and election of a board of directors. And the directors are listed there. They come from across the county, I think. Sherry Corbin, Ron Gagne, Elizabeth Hall, Margaret Holcomb, June LeBombard, Barbara Mooney, Kathy Rousseau, and Tim McKenzie were the board of directors initially. So the first thing Cider does is beginning to provide information and referral services and coordinating volunteers to answer the phone. So like the Island Info quarterly newsletter was set up. This isn't the original copy, but you know, it's still out there 30 years later. Island Info. And to raise money, the first hot dog stand was at Applefest. So that's where. So we had no other incomes now. You know, now you pay if you want to join. Cider. I'll talk about how you do it.
And that was just, could I throw it, that's, and pardon me for throwing things in, but I can. That was the start of our very long and happy relationship with the Hackett family, who hosted barn sales. You probably all went there and helped out there and saw the junk run through away for us. But that was the start of all of that in 2002. Or excuse me, before
93,
that.
this is 93.
So basically,
This is Applefest.
what happened was we got this organization now, but now we've got to have something to do. So we had to have board members from all the island communities in Albergate. That was mandatory. We knew that in our hearts that had to happen. But the core was myself, Richard Crocker, who was the minister of the Congregational Church, Ben Gilmoyden, and Tim McKenzie. Tim brought the nonprofit know-how. And we met weekly, I think it was weekly for a long time, trying to figure out what needed to be done, how we were going to do it. We didn't have any money. We didn't have any employees. We had nothing. So again, it was selling hot dogs that made the money for cider. From that point, we had lots of retreats and come up with missions. You had to, you had to build this organization from nothing. And we knew that one thing that we could do was first thing to make people feel more comfortable is to connect people with people. So that one of the very first programs was just hooking people up so that they got a phone call in the morning to make sure that they were still alive, because that's what people's fear was. So people just got a phone call in the morning, volunteers were just hooked up with other people around the town.
You're still alive, Jim? Yeah, okay. Is that Lee calling?
So that was the initial step, and then as we brought in new board members, Eileen and Linda joined the board. You guys were really the fundraising committee, if I remember right. It got even worse than selling hot dogs at Applefest. We were selling ice cream bars at 4th of July parade. Brownies sales. It was slim pickings for a while, and we were just trying to figure out how we were going to do this. Then, CVAA, which is the Champlain Valley Area on Agency, dumped the meal site on us. They gave us 1 week to pick up the meal site. They said, we have decided we're no longer doing the services, we're only going to pay for the services to happen. So you got a week to pick this up or we're closing it.
Wow.
We didn't have any money, we didn't know what we were doing, so Claudia jumped in and really took that over. CVAA helped us tremendously to do that. And that really gave the community of cider, because we had a congregate meal site. So that gave the community. Then in the late 90s, I'm jumping ahead of your thing.
So I'm just, back to me, in '94, the first paid staff, Bill Joyce, answered phones and scheduled rides. Here's Bill. Bill, remember him?
They're all so young.
We were young.
Here's Bill and Ben Gilboard. Okay. And then the use of office space above King Insurance. That was the first location for the phones, okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
See the cider song? Come on.
Okay. So,
And I'm sure that, Kim, you had people dropping in to say, can I get cider here?
Yes.
and this says, this probably came from that report, contracted with CVAA to manage the meal site. It's not exactly what you said.
Well, we were contracted, but it wasn't that nice. No, it was not that nice at all. We were contracted with them only because they paid us per meal to do it.
So then Island Info News, again, this is most about the Island Care Ring, telephone reassurance, so that's what you were talking about. Care Ring, they called it. The first barn and bake sale at Hackett's Orchard. So we're moving up from hot dogs to bakery and stuff, so we're charging more, right? And
No, we were doing that with the other,
okay.
every opportunity to make a buck.
Okay. So that's why this is an oral history,
Right.
so this isn't a presentation.
Yeah.
So the cider volunteers begin cooking meals at the meal site. Claudia and Patsy.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. That's around the- good old time.
Prior to that, it was a cook who was paid,
Oh, yeah.
but was not a cider person. It
Right,
was
they
the
had a
person-
cook.
They had a cook.
Right, and I think we continued with the cook for a while.
And I believe that these ladies did this for free.
Yes,
Um,
yes, and they had other volunteers too. Yes,
We're gonna eat up all our hot dog profits.
yeah. But I believe that we kept the cook for a while, and then it transferred in.
Yeah.
There was no way we could set the whole thing up instantly.
Was this still about 87? Huh?
Who bought the first van?
Well, wait.
So we didn't buy a van.
They contracted with CVAA to operate a van to bring seniors to the meal site. That's 97, that's the extent of vans, was getting people to.
Yeah, I don't remember any of that.
Well, that's what it said.
Yeah, it was actually a CVAA van that I believe they turned over to them and we began just bringing people to the meal site.
Right. The turning point that I would say for cider becoming more than some place that people wanted to buy cider was when Senator Mazza came out and said there was a lot of transportation money out there. And he came out with 2 vans and he said, I think you need these.
Wow.
And
Okay, so that's 99.
yeah, to do your program. And that put cider on the back of the vans, on the side of the vans, and now people knew what it was. Up until then, we probably annually had a meeting saying, how are we going to change the name of this organization? Because it just didn't work. It was too long to write out, and nobody knew what it was. That made the difference.
And it wasn't just the vans. That was the beginning of our receiving state funds to provide some transportation for elders and people with disabilities. Back in those days, it was not through the Agency of Transportation, though. It was through the Agency of Human Services. So we used to, later on, there was actually a competitive application process for funds, and Jim wrote damn good applications, and I designated it because I was a good executive director.
Well, you guys weren't here yet.
No, but this is the same, so I'm just like, this is the same sort of, this was the start of our getting, then the Agency of Transportation took that funding over years later, but regardless, that was the beginning of our getting not just access to vehicles, where we paid 10% of the cost.
Yeah, but I'm going to take that back and say that is not when this started. That started when you came in and you knew how to get that money.
Ooh, those vans were there before I came.
The vans were there, but we weren't utilizing them to the extent that you did.
No, no.
We tried to figure out how to use them, basically.
And the ADA was only 5 years old at the time, so it made sense. That
Right.
that's all.
Stephanie, you got a question? Or a
Well,
comment?
I remember Bill Joyce was driving those vans and working for Ben and Claudia up over at Kinney's. And he was doing all that driving of the van. And then they needed him more. And so he came to me and said, I know that you drive a motorhome. Would you like to drive? So he and I were doing it.
Yep.
And I was doing it in the summer and going away in the winter. And then Connie Van Ryn's husband took over in the winter.
But you were mainly driving to meal sites, correct?
I was taking everybody to the meal sites, picking them up and taking them to the meal site. And then they'd give me the Meals on Wheels for people, and I'd be delivering those on my way back.
Right, but they weren't used to the way that you used them later, the vans.
No, I think when I arrived in January of '02, Bill, they were driving, it was mostly the meal site, but there were trips, I think we were doing at least one dialysis patient by then. There were some.
Yeah.
And I know for a number of years, and it sounded like before I came and when we were first there, we were not able to use that money because you had to draw it down, and that was, we couldn't do it. We couldn't find ways to spend it.
Right.
Legitimately. Not a problem later on, may I say.
So they have the 2 WC accessible vans. I guess that means wheelchair, not water closet, right? Senator didn't know. Okay, they hired Kelly to cook, so now we have a big cook, and hired Bob Levine to drive. So we're starting to get employees.
And Bob Levine continues to drive. Slowly, really slowly.
You still driving?
Yes,
Still driving, only on
slowly.
So yeah, does anybody have any stories about when Bob took you to a doctor's appointment and forgot to bring you back or anything like that?
Oh, I have a story.
Oh.
So Bob Levine would pick up my mother-in-law. So when Jerry's mom lived with us for years, he picked her up. She was with us like 2005 to 2010. And then after she left, because she went to New Jersey, he still would drive by, come in the driveway, wave to us, and go out.
That's why it takes so long.
Okay, so since bake sales were off, membership dues were set at $2 per household. So now we have to pay these people, right?
No, we were always a membership organization.
Yeah.
But that was important because that showed community involvement for anything that we did. So we were always a membership organization, but literally the dues, we had an annual meeting and the dues were $1 and we set them every year.
Just nominal, yeah. And then in 2000, Caitlin McDonald was hired as the first executive director. And I don't remember her, but I think she was around for a year or two. Because in 2002, modern history now, Robin Way and Jim Holtschuh were hired as executive director and program coordinators.
Mention living strong.
What's that? You didn't get to see that.
So here,
Well, he's gonna show the picture.
Oh, Lord.
Who's that?
Looks pretty ominous, doesn't he?
What color hair is that?
And if that wasn't enough for us, here he is with Bob.
Bob still has that hat.
Bob, yes. Bob is exactly 10 years older. Jim and Bob have the exact same birthday. September 30th, 1944, which puts them 10 years older than me. So I've always been able to just judge how things are going by watching how Jim and Bob. Jim falls down holes and stuff, so I don't understand that, but it's been kind of a barometer.
So these pictures and junk I'm showing you, Robin had this big box, I should have brought it, of pictures and junk in the cider closet, so I just went through that. I couldn't find a good one in Jim Holtschuh to.
Here I am.
Okay.
Well, I've got this thumb drive, you could put the pictures
Well,
in.
I was calling this part one because
Yeah.
but if we.
We're whipping right
it's
through it.
early, we are whipping right through. So I can show you a little slideshow.
So I just, yeah, if you can,
Okay, so then, so the first, also 2003, the Flashlight into Life program begins. Richard Jim and Deb LaPorte.
Actually, let's wait a minute, go back a bit, because in the, previous to this, there was also a home share program. That Edith's sister-in-law, what was her name, Mom?
Izzy.
Izzy.
The Carol Miller,
yeah, Izzy
Izzy
Hay.
and Carol Miller were working on.
And Hank.
And Hank. There was,
Which eventually merged into sort of a partnership with Home Share Vermont.
right. So there were.
Oh, yeah, that was back here.
The other thing that took place during this whole time that was not in any of this is, way back, mid-90s, we were all set to build senior housing in Grand Isle. We were, in fact, what happened was, is I had a week's notice. Now granted, there's only 4 of us on the board. I had a week's notice, Tim McKenzie was leaving, he was board chair. He was leaving and he was also the head of the senior housing program. And he was leaving to go out west. And as far as I knew, the senior housing was going to break ground in a few months. Yeah, when I got in there, they were well on their way, the group in Grand Isle. It was going to be behind the town hall. There's a big property back in there that had a lot of wastewater. It was going to be built back in there. And we were ready to go. We were working with Lake Champlain Housing. And basically, members of the community in Grand Isle knocked it down. They were ready to build it. Lake Champlain Housing was. So that, 20 years later.
Why did they knock it down?
Change.
And well, yeah, you may know.
Well, what I remember, I just moved up there in '96, and that structure was not worthy of working with.
No, it would have been in behind it anyway.
Okay.
The Pocket House was
Right,
trying
okay.
to incorporate the Pocket House, which is It's that very old house right in the middle of Grand Isle. It was linked to a community center program in Grand Isle that was very similar to a community center project that was planned for Jericho. And the Jericho went down in flames and this one followed. But that being said, we had a big meeting in Grand Isle, and I don't really have a good way of saying this, so I'm not going to say it. But there were a very small handful of people that really daggered it and buried it. And why they did, I don't really know. I honestly don't really know, except they could. Because it doesn't make, I mean, it wasn't any skin off anybody's butt, so. But otherwise, there would have been a senior housing back there.
Good location.
I think it's better where it is now. It smells better.
Sherry, I was on the board of Home Share Vermont for a long time with Carol Miller, and they worked hard to get the word out about Home Share Vermont. It's a very unique organization. It's branched out. Several states have adopted what they do, but they are very careful when they match people. And I got on the board because my mother was elderly, living alone in the middle of Burlington. And she had 3 home share matches in probably 10 years that were lifesavers to us. Because she had people who could stay overnight with her, fix meals for her, help her with what was left of the mortgage. And my sister and I had young children who couldn't do it. So there were a number of home shares over the years up here in the islands. Carol was the principal person, but they raised a lot of money to get the word out about home share. And it's still alive, people. So, you know, if anybody wants to know more about it, talk to me, because it's a wonderful program.
And it was always challenging, and it is challenging, to find home seekers
Yes,
in rural areas.
because they have to have transportation. But a lot of times what also worked was students looking for housing and didn't want to be in the middle of Burlington and did have wheels, were more than willing to come up to the islands.
The best match that happened during my memory, which was somewhat serendipitous, is like the 2 people showed up with a need and an answer in the same day. That happens a lot with Cider, by the way. There's an amazing amount of serendipity that is, Jim will attest, that follows this organization. I can't explain it, but it's a good thing. Mary White. Remember Mary White was matched with a woman who I believe was an employee at the correction center in St. Albans, and she did not want to, she had a car, and she did not want to live in Burlington. She was new to the area, but didn't want to live in Burlington. And they were together for 3 years, 2, 3, 4 years, but it kept Mary in her home a long time other than it might otherwise have been. Yeah, really good program.
So also in 2002, the Tough Strong Living Program begins. It's still going, I think.
It's definitely still going.
You see the weights there and stuff?
Yeah,
And, what else did they say? And then, I don't know what this is, they might have a bowling team or something.
They wanted shirts one year.
We still have some of those shirts that folks want though.
All right. Yeah. So I was thinking, Rob, you know, we got a merch table, we're selling books and stuff. We should have set up a cider merch table where we sell hats and stuff, so next time. Okay, so yes.
that was nice.
Yeah. Okay. So back to the Flashlight in the Life program, and I don't remember exactly the details of this, but it was what, counseling or?
So, yeah, I don't know when you want me to sort of
Now.
begin filling in, okay?
You're hired.
So, all right,
You're hired.
so we
Hired
got,
to start this.
it's 7:33 according to my watch,
Yeah, no, I keep
and we're going to when?
So, well.
Because, I'm gonna stand up.
You know,
because-
actually,
Yeah,
we got a TBD in our historical society schedule for next month for the finish.
Perfect, that's why I wanna do just,
Exactly.
I want, so here's what I could do to fill the rest, I could fill up all the time you want, because there's so many interests to me.
Go in the front there.
Cider's been,
You want a microphone?
everybody almost in here, almost everybody that I still can recognize, even though I'm old and my eyes are not as good.
The snacks back there. for stuff
How many people in here had something to do with cider as a volunteer or a staff or, yeah, okay. Because that's what makes Cider great, because this is the quintessential community organization. You can go anywhere in the state, I'll tell you, this is it. So when I came here, I had left, Jim and I had been working for a few years up at the IBM plant as personnel supervisors for manpower temporary services. And there's people here who worked with us, and so, not me. And so we supervised, I don't know, 40 people each, they were staffing, all kinds of stuff. And they began in 2000 laying off everybody, IBMers, contractors. So eventually in 2001, all of my people pretty much got laid off, so they didn't need a supervisor. So Friday before September 11th, I got laid off. Gave me a whole lot of time to watch TV over the coming few weeks. I was hired for this job in November of 2002. It was a 28-hour position, but I needed a job, which I could supplement by driving some hours, okay, at the driver rate. Can't do that anymore. The employment people frown on that sort of thing, but that's what I did. So I started January 2nd, 2002. The first thing I did was stick up something that had the zip codes of the islands. I did not know much about the islands. I had been living in Colchester for 20-something years, like a lot of people. I went to UVM, stayed in the Burlington area. The islands and stuff up here was a place I drove through if I got lost coming out of Montreal and came down the wrong bridge, and then we'd have to go down this way. Maybe went up to the sandbar or something like that. So I did not really know the community all that well. But I had a small amount of experience in transportation, because I was, 40 years ago now, I was the sole paid employee of SSTA, Special Services Transportation, with the 100 vans and shit. We were in a tiny little office, tiny little closet office. In the next tiny little closet office was Project Home, which grew to be Home Share Vermont. I think RSVP. We were in the bottom floor of the Cathedral Square Tower down in Burlington. So I had some experience after a few years of doing that stuff. So when I answered the ad, I managed to talk my way into getting hired here. I knew I wanted to work here when they met me in the bank, and somebody handed me a Snickers bar. It's a great deal. So I started, Caitlin had left after a year as a director. I had like 2 days of being shown the database, how it worked on the computer. We were sitting in the old Southwind Market. She was showing me that. She said, Bill Joyce will tell you everything else you need to know. And he did. And the first thing he said to me was, you are going to hate the burn and bake sale. Because I didn't realize I was never going to get a Memorial Day weekend off for like the next 15 years. They did not mention that. So when I started, we had Bob, we had a couple of people driving, we were upstairs in Kim's place, and Bill was handling a lot of the scheduling, and he was writing most of the newsletter. Not long after I got there, and I don't think because of me, he decided that he was going to leave as well that summer. So in that summer, he gave his notice, and Jim, by that point, he had been laid off as well. His people hung on a little longer. So I convinced him that he should come back and do something with his time. And so he took over Bill's job. And for the first several years, it was really the two of us and a couple of drivers, and then volunteers. Ben and Claudia I'm so sorry Claudia is not here, because there are no people more integrated and important to Cider's success and what it became than Ben and Claudia.
Yes.
Claudia is still on staff though. To this day, she is still an employee of Cider.
Really?
Though, and we'll do it in the second time we do this. See, I am now home with a cat most of the time, so I don't know how to talk to them, so you people who come to this are gonna now have to deal with that. When Bill left, we began doing, we were doing transportation to the meal site, we were doing dialysis stuff. We got our second van that year, so we had two of the big square vans, and we had one Dodge van that had, and I have pictures, if we could run the, I don't know how to do this thing. Do you know how to do this?
Figure it out for next time.
Figure it out, all right, I do have some photographs. Because we started taking digital photographs right about that, so from 2000 and the aughts it goes forward. But it was mostly, well, we had a budget, it was under $100,000. We immediately had a hole in the budget. This was like the spring, so the board said, well, we got like, we're like $10,000 short in our budget, and may I say, Cider almost never, ever did we finish in the red, thanks to everybody here about it. So we needed to have a fundraiser, and one of our first experiences as a fundraiser was the coin drop. Which, if you were looking for an easy way and a way to make money, because it's just begging, out here, we did it 2 years, and then we frankly decided it was too dangerous. Okay, you would lean over, and people would hopefully give you money. They were generally always polite, I will say, at least, and once in a while not always. But then you would step back. And we were standing on the center line, and when you step back, you start to step back over the line, and the traffic going the other way was not slowing down. And we had a couple of older folks at that time, probably seemed older at the time, who were not terribly steady on the feet. So we just realized this was probably not a safe thing to be doing, and we followed all the rules. I drive around, I see these coin drops in different places, and like in Winooski and stuff, and I could look at them and go, you're breaking all the damn rules that we were supposed to follow in terms of signs and where you're located and stuff. But we would do $500 an hour. I think we figured it was $500 an hour over 4 hours out here. It's a bucket, you know how heavy that is? And financial stuff was so loose that I took the bucket home and fished out all the bills, and to, now you just, yeah.
Half of that in Albert,
And half as much in Albert.
but mostly Canadian coin.
We did that for, 2 years up there. So once we got started, one of the first things that started at that point was the Tough Strong Living program, which at that time was a research program out of Tufts University. And they would set up these groups, and you would use all their exercise, the regimen they had developed down at Tufts. They provided us with the weights and the things to do it, and then we would report back to them after each session the progress that you folks, the participants, made. That went on for several years. Carol Stata started that. That is one of the most successful things I think Cider ever did, except for, to the best of my knowledge, except for Lori Janik, God bless her, tripping over something and breaking her hip.
The dog.
Well, it was something like, it was an accident, and she recovered really quickly. The doctors told her it was because she was in such good shape. No one else who was in that program was ever injured and in that sort of a fall and needed to go to the hospital. I think it's a pretty remarkable thing. It's a wonderful program. They're still doing it if you're not involved in it. It spread where for a while we had 2 classes. We were doing it in North Hero. Then eventually Carol Stata began doing her own program up in Alberg, and I think they still run something similar up there. The agency on Agewell now, their bone builder program that you hear is similar in some ways. When Tufts, eventually the money ran out, and we had a choice of, we want to do something with bone builders or something, but in cider fashion, we went rogue and figured we'll just fund it and do it ourselves, and we'll just take all their old exercises and we'll use them, and we won't send information into it. So that worked out pretty well, but that is still going on.
And the name changed to Living Strong in the Islands.
We had to change the name because it was, the original name was registered and something, so we flip-flopped it. Nothing that exciting. The end-of-life program, that was largely Dick Bingham. Dick. Devilport, who was the Methodist minister up in Isle of Lamont back in those days, and who served on our board. If you're ever really bored and you wanted to find something to go to sleep, you could read through old cider board minutes, but when you get to Deb's, they were written in the form of a letter to her imaginary cousin. And she would give you the facts, but she would describe what people were wearing. It was the most creative board minutes I've ever seen. That was only for a few months, but that was they're over there somewhere. So Mark Messler used to live up in South Europe here. The idea about this originally was to try to get people talking about death and dying, just talking about it. Because it's a comfortable thing for a number of people. And a lot of the original idea was to work with the pastors in the islands and do things like put articles in the Islander, hold some workshops or presentations on various subjects that related to end-of-life care. And over the years, we did some really interesting ones too. We did near-death experiences. We went up to the Fisk Farm up in Isle of Lamont. We had people come who would do some presentations on near-death experiences. And a lot of these things, no matter what I went into thinking, I left with my eyes opened a little bit different. That was pretty interesting. We had a very controversial one over the death with dignity law. We did it up at the Grand Isle School, where we brought people from the opposing, very emotional viewpoints of that, and had a really civilized, interesting discussion in the gym over there. That was fun. And other things like that. And then eventually, the presentations kind of tailed off, but I did, and I think Jordan, they still do put some information in the newsletter every month that some sort of subject about that. That same year, 2003, Vera Greer. Who's Vera Greer? I get confused over whether it was her or the woman who lived with her. Lived over here, right almost across the street up here. The stained glass studio. There was a stained glass place
right.
there. Remember that? So that was where the first ramp was. One of the ladies was in rehab and was only going to be able to come home if there was, because it was like a mobile home. If there was yes, there we are. We look younger there, don't we? I should make a note that Jim built the wheelchair ramps, okay? I carried stuff. Yes. I carried stuff and bent nails, but that was largely it, because I have no. But that was the first one, and that lady did not get to come home and use it. And then I think our next one was actually a deck up in North Hero, but then I believe the next ramp we built, something similar to that happened, where the person did not get to use it. And that happened a couple times early on, where we began to think, we should practice wearing like death costumes when we show up with a hammer at your house, because maybe this isn't good time. But obviously that changed, and that program took off to where, how many are they doing now?
33
Here's
years.
number 100.
They never
Yeah.
stopped.
This is number 100.
100,
Is that it?
we were up to like 120 when I left 3 years ago. That's the Bev Austin's. That was Bev Austin's place down here. That was the 100th ramp.
Tell me who they all are. I don't know who they all are. Start on the left. Who's that? No, the next one. On the left,
Rob.
that's
That's me,
Robin.
Dick Ernst, Dolph, Jim.
Okay.
Then there was a whole bunch of other
All of them were
volunteers.
still involved in some way.
There was a whole bunch of the guys that were really building the ramp. We just stepped in for the picture, okay, to be honest with it. But that had just made, and the improvements between the way we used to do this, very labor intensive, to we went to using that, then we went to a nail gun. We were doing one up in Grand Isle, and the guy's son who lived there said, I got a nail gun you could use. And they ended up using it, so we moved to a nail gun that screwed things.
And he donated a nail
You
gun
don't,
that we still use, Mr. Manfred. When I started with them, they used to before nail guns or even nails, or they put it together with carriage bolts. So they'd have a spade bit, drill a hole, 1 inch hole or whatever, put a carriage bolt through there, tighten it up, do another one. Oh man, you know. So,
Built them to last.
and then we had hammers and nails, you know, and somehow Jim got this deal on nails from China. He still has a box because he had about a 50% rate of not bending them. Heidi, what?
So, tell a story about my mother. Oh. Building a ramp with my mother.
With your mother. Oh, yeah. So you know, it was mostly guys doing it, but then you know.
not always. Jeannie back there bent a few nails.
Yeah, and then, yeah. And so June Chamberlain, you know,
Mhm.
I didn't really know June, so he said, you know, being a chauvinist, I don't know what I was. Yeah, June, can you help me hold up the end of this board and stuff while I cut it? And so I'm doing this stuff, and she's helping me calm, you know. And all of a sudden, somehow it was revealed to me that she made her own kitchen cabinets. So I just got out of the way. Yeah, that was so funny. Cute, man.
But there are ramps that were built that were just huge ramps where you start off at the back and you know, have to go around the entire front of the house to do it.
So Bob Bierman started to.
Wasn't Ron helping on designing, the guy up in Grand Isle that was in a wheelchair? Didn't he help design some of these ramps or not? Maybe he had his own business. But, you remember? Yeah.
Jim designed all the ramps that
Okay.
we did. But you know, they're all standard, so you really have these regular pieces that go together. It's like having a kit, you know. So when Jim and Robin were going to hire somebody to take over the ramps, they got tired of building them, I guess. I just said, well, I can be the clerk of the works and stuff. You just design it and get me the volunteers, okay? So I did that. And the first one, I think, one of the first ones that happened was the summer, hot day in July. We're doing something for Rod Hill up there, and they got me, Jim said, oh, you need 3 volunteers. One guy from court diversion, one guy with a heart condition, and another guy had to leave at noon. So I'm throwing around all this pressure-treated lumber, so I said, all right, with this. So we called in, now we got these guys at, how many have on the last one, 11? I don't know.
It's the only group we turn people away from.
We never turn people away.
There's so many volunteers, it's the only group that we say, too many hands.
No, bring on them. The younger ones, bring them on. So Bob Bierman started to plot where all these things are. This is South here in Grand Isle. And he hasn't done North here, and Alberg is going to be
Albert is a lot.
glowing red. I mean, there's so many up there.
Mobile homes, anywhere you have mobile homes.
Well, yeah.
Because they start off so high off the ground.
So, when I took over the museum, the door was here and it just had like a step and then a step and a step, and it was hard to open the door and get in, and so they told me they wanted, you know, new handicap accessible steps, because we couldn't put a ramp in, because there wasn't enough room. The museum doesn't have enough land, but we could put like longer steps and make them lower rise, and we called Cider. And they came and they put those steps in at the museum for us, so I want to give them a hand, because they've made a big difference for people visiting the museum.
Because generally, we receive sometimes requests from places that were not residences. So if it was a business or something, we couldn't really do that. Even a church, we always felt funny about using Cider donated money for things that were not necessarily Cider. So we would design a ramp for somebody, and sometimes our volunteers would provide labor, but not necessarily wearing their Cider hats, as it were. So we did some ramps like that. The ramp on St. Joseph's Church up in Grand Isle, that was designed by us. The little ramp at the Congo Church was one.
We did pay for the materials.
Yes.
The museum did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was volunteer labor. Yeah.
And we also began to realize there were times where somebody needed a ramp, but a wooden, these big structures, even if they're only there temporarily, they're pretty hard to take out. I mean, it's not an easy thing to move these things around. There were times that maybe something temporary would work. So we also had originally some small folding metal ramps that if you had a step or two, that would work. If you had any more than that, it was too steep. You could get that at once. And then we looked into deck systems. We started talking about the idea of boat decks, that they have, these modular steel frames, aluminum things, boat decks that could work as a wheelchair ramp as well. And they have one or two now, right?
It floats out in front of Keeler Bay in South Hero right now.
And those work. And you could go pretty much anywhere else in the state of Vermont, and you're going to have a hard time finding somebody to build you a wheelchair ramp. We would get frequent calls from Franklin County and Chittenden County folks, and we would have to say, no, we can.
So Robin, on that same vein, not ramp vein, but how many communities in Vermont have a program similar to Cider?
None exactly. The difference that we have is a couple things. One is geography. Our isolation, which causes a lot of the problems that we face, also meant that the organizations that provide some services, there's not enough people, they're not here. And so it became easier for some of these programs to let Cider do things that in other areas maybe would be done by some combination or other organization. We began to do sort of everything all at once. We could look at you as a person and say, these are the things you need. It's not that we're a transportation provider, we can't do anything else than that. We're going to do everything that we can do. We'll get you food, we'll get you rides, we'll build you a ramp, we'll loan you a cane, a walker, a porta potty, whatever, like that. The other thing was that was true for transportation as well. It really, and I think Jordan can attest, having worked at Green Mountain Transit, it's really not cost effective or customer service effective to provide transportation on this isolated area where our paths go just back and forth, in and out of St. Albans, down to Burlington, back and forth. It's not really worth it for them to try to do that in these other communities. And the secret, they all have full-time paid drivers. Cider, in that vein that we always had of asking people to do things for free, or if not for free, damn near close to free, we have drivers who are flexible enough, they're part-time, and when they're not driving, they're not on the clock. The schedule that the vehicles go tends to run, right, I mean, it's still the same. It's a lot of early programs and stuff, early morning, back in the afternoon. There's periods of time where you don't need very many drivers. You could go by the cider lot in the middle of the day a lot of times when it was down
To
there.
this day, cider remains the lowest cost public transit provider in the state, by hour, the lowest cost.
So they were willing, originally we got our money directly from the state, then the state decided that it would all be funneled through public transit programs, so we had to now contract with the Northwest Vermont Public Transit Network, the Barney Bus people, who've been around a while. And then they almost went belly up, and actually the state came and talked to us about going over to St. Albans and taking over all the elderly handicapped door-to-door stuff, and that CCTA at that time would take over the fixed bus route. And we met with them and then said, no, it makes no sense anymore, it does to have you doing it over here. That was not our mission, 7 times our population. I didn't want to work that hard. So we said no. Green Mountain eventually stepped in and we began partnering with Green Mountain. And from the start, even though we are a contractor, it was really a partnership. I think we've always had a really good relationship with the people at Green Mountain Transit. I can't speak.
But I mean even not just transportation, but the organization on a whole, because this organization doesn't just do transportation, it does community.
So my point on that, the transportation provided the revenue to enable us to do all these other things so that we're having fundraising stuff and everything like that, but we're spending a lot more money than we're raising on barn and bake sales.
Right.
And it's that transportation funding that enabled us to have a full-time executive director and me to retire eventually, thank you very much. You wouldn't have that. In a lot of other places, there are little organizations that do bits and pieces of these things, but they don't have that revenue source that we had with cider, where it was 2/3, 3/4 of our income in a year. That gave us an advantage that nobody else has. No other.
And that came with you.
I know.
That came with you because you had the knowledge, you brought cider the knowledge to be able to do that. Because trust me, we didn't have it.
Heidi.
What's really nice is, I've got a boyfriend who uses cider 3 times a week for dialysis, but it's small enough that if chaos ensues, which it does with him lately, I can call Debbie and say, he's not gonna make it, but I can call my morning driver, Stephen, and say, hey, don't pick him up today. So it's still, even though it's gotten bigger, it's still a really nice community.
It's small enough.
Yep.
Yeah, it's small
It is
enough.
so successful that I've gotten calls from at least 2 separate counties over the past year about starting.
And that's what I'm getting at, is that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Because I've got friends in other parts of the state that don't have anything like this. And if we can help them do
There's
that.
a group down in Bennington that got a $300,000 grant from V-Trans this year to start a transportation program that was already doing the
Right.
other stuff.
Right.
Yeah, because it's community transportation. It really is, and it works best at a community level. Volunteers, we always had, now granted COVID kicked the legs out of our volunteer.
That's next week.
That's the next thing.
So I got
Yeah.
one more thing, because it is almost 8 o'clock, just maybe one more thing where cider took a giant leap off the islands.
We'll do that next time, because he's gonna have
Oh,
all
because I
sorts
gotta
of
show
stories.
you the pictures.
He's got lots of stories on that.
At the fish concert.
Yes.
They made a movie, Robin. I don't know if you saw it. about
That again was back in the old days when you got Linda.
They've got so many
You
stories
could
on
get
that.
away with some things that probably the state might frown on nowadays.
So we'll end it there. 2005, cider moved to the office next to Granny's attic. I forget what was in there before cider was in there.
There's one more thing I'd like to say, that I don't think cider would have ever gotten off the ground if it wasn't for the South Hero Congregational Church. They provided the money, they provided the meal site location, they provided the volunteers in the early days. And it just wouldn't have happened.
It's still our art.
It's still, that's always been, the core was the Congo Church over here and its people.
And we had Richard and the Moydens.
So there's refreshments.
Well, no, but that's.
Oh, yeah, so it's 8 o'clock, so you have about a minute to get your refreshments.
Thank you for indulging me.
Everybody come.
So,